Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. We have a special guest coming on the show, so stay tuned. Before I bring on our rock star guest, I do want to make some announcements for you. First things first, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. It will be featured on Spotify and all of the social media platforms, so look out for it. Thanks for those that are very supportive and that have been there for us throughout the years. You've been a part of this podcast journey. It's been fabulous. Next announcement is speaking of social media, I want to invite you to follow me on social media. So Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indy Speak and Teach. And we've got Instagram is Indy238. YouTube is India White 123. TikTok is Dr. India White. Thank you to all of those that have been, submitting content, helping me with reviews, testimonials. I love y'all too. I appreciate the chat very much. I also want to remind you guys to check out the website www.india-white.com for books, blogs, workbooks, whatnot, and to schedule me for your next speaking and coaching event. There's plenty of things going on that website, so check it out when you get a chance. Also, I have some upcoming events. I'll be at the Silicon Valley Math Summit in August in California, coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll see you guys there. Thank you for the opportunity again for those that reached out to me. I'll also be at the Minnesota district. I'll be training you guys down there at the end of this month. Thank you for having me, Minnesota. And I'll be at NCSM and NCTM. And then, of course, there's a blanket of other conferences here. There's ICTM in Iowa. There's OCTM in Ohio that I'm planning on going to, ATM&E also, as well as the Northwest Math Conference coming up and more. Thank you to all of you. Love y'all. Appreciate it very much. Looking forward to digging into this work with you and closing the achievement gap the best way we can. When you get a chance, please check out the Grit Mini Workshop. Thank you, Robert, for this opportunity on the Grassroots Workshops website. Take a stab at grit. Find out what is it all about. Take it back with your team. Do some PLC work on it. Learn from yourself. See how you can use it. And I would say definitely during the school year, it would be most effective if you're taking that mini workshop, because you can really start implementing and applying the strategies that we talk about from that workshop to your teaching practices and to your students. And so with that said, I am honored to bring on with us an educator in Florida who is going to be talking about grit, but in a totally different lens. She's going to talk to us about education and civics, which she's a rock star in. I'm so honored to bring on to this show a curriculum specialist, educator for the last 19 years, rocking it out in the state of Florida. And that is our girl here, Cindy Marstern. How are you, Cindy?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being on my show. So,
inviting me.
So guys, so I'm so happy to have Cindy here. She is, as I said, she's an educator for several years here. Put in the work. Thank you for the work that you've done. Now, I don't want to spill the beans. So, Cindy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm actually a native of Florida. I've been an educator for the past 19 years. Most of that time has been in Broward County, where I've taught civics at the AP honors regular level and as well as U.S. history. Right now, I'm currently serving as a curriculum support specialist here in South Florida for actually Miami-Dade Public Schools, which is the third largest district in the nation. So it's a huge task. I absolutely love it. And I'm just happy to be on here to talk about all things civics related.
I love it. And so, my thing is grit. So I'm like, why don't we just combine these two worlds together, and let's talk to our audience. This is an audience of rockstar teachers, principals, superintendents, educators, those that support educators, organizations that are looking for people like you. So first things first is I want to kind of talk a little bit about grit and how that's affected your journey. Now, grit is defined by Dr. Angela Duckworth as having passion and perseverance to obtain a long-term goal, right? I have come up with an acronym for grit, which is great resilience and time, to help us to kind of stay balanced and understand how to handle this and how to approach grit as educators. So with that said, my question to you will be, can you talk to us about a professional time that you've had to use grit? How does grit play a role in now as a civics curriculum support specialist and all the great things you've done in education?
when I think of grit and I think of it in terms of my position right now, I think I definitely tap into grit whenever I am assisting and coaching teachers all across the county. Now, when teachers hear support or coach, they freak out, right? Because they're automatically thinking something's wrong. But in most cases, nothing's wrong. We're just here to take you to the next level. It's not to say that you're all the way at the bottom and we're actually like starting from the ground up. But sometimes receiving that coaching mechanism allows teachers to actually reflect and take time to make enhancements in any area that they see fit. So that's grit for me. Is getting the buy-in from the teachers, and in most cases, when I do get the buy-in, they're able to relax, and we're able to see how we can enhance and move forward.
I love that. And it's so funny you said that because you're talking about creating buy-in for teachers. And,
Yes.
we're going to talk a little bit about civics and grit and education. For me, it has been said kind of on the streets that civics is not really an area of focus for those in the BIPOC community. I mean, it's one of those things like, I mean, we've talked about DEI, we've talked about all these different interests. When I think of civics, and from my personal experience, I'm going to be honest, I did not have a positive experience and I was not as gritty about civics class as I was about math class because civics made me feel like all we talked about was the negative history, slavery, how blacks are, not on the same level and all the injustices they went through. And nobody wants to sit through that, as an African American or,
I
as a,
can hear that.
you know what I mean? And so how are you able then to help students be gritty about civics and teachers be gritty about civics? And then we're going to go into parents, but I want to do civics about teachers and students. How do you help them to cultivate grit to be interested in civics today?
Well, first of all, I'm in the room. I think representation is like major because most civics teachers are not um, of my skin color.
Right.
Let's just be real
You're
and
right.
just keep it 100. So most of us are not teaching civics. We're usually teaching a different social science subject like history, and you know how kids automatically view history as well. Um, but just imagine teaching civics at an AP level. Not only are you underrepresented, but the student population is underrepresented as
Yeah.
well. So, how do I get kids to become more passionate about civic education? Is to allow them to see how it impacts them, specifically on the local level. So, I think just good old basic civic knowledge is a great way to start, but also letting them see your passion. Like I am very passionate about civic education. Um, I keep things and topics very current. I let them see how I enjoy it and how it impacts me, and that transcends to them.
Yeah.
Um, we have some issues. For example, if you look at Congress on a national level, most of them are white, male, you know, and they're usually like in their mid to, let's say, late 50s. So just looking at their representatives, there's an automatic disconnect. So I always tell my students, how can we have a Congress that is a true reflection of our country? We
Mm.
have to get involved.
Yeah.
Every member in Congress that you see has a high level of civic education. And that didn't necessarily start in the classroom, but there came a point in time in their life when the light bulb went off and they said, you know what? This is how we can invoke social change is through our government. So if I can instill that in you, imagine what that demographic makeup could be in the next 20 to 30 years. So if you want to see the change, you have to be the change.
I love that.
That can start as small as running for a seat in your community. You know, you can start off with your HOA, then you move up to the city, then you move up to the county, the state, and DC. But the only way to get those numbers to change is to embed that in our kids at a very young age. Unfortunately, this is the problem that we have. When you look at grades K through 5, what are the two subjects that everyone's focused on?
Reading and math.
reading and math. And if you look at the schools that's having the most issues regarding reading and math, it is unfortunately in our minority
Underserved
neighborhood.
communities.
So
Right.
as a third or fourth grade teacher, what are you going to focus on? Civics?
No,
Or
reading.
gonna-
Yeah.
there you go. So my job is to get teachers to see that you can kill two birds with one stone.
Wow.
You can teach civics and teach reading.
I like that.
And there's another issue. It's
Hmm.
hard for the teacher to do that when they're not
Representative.
knowledgeable in civic education as well.
Yeah.
So civic education is not only needed amongst our kids, adults need like a 4-week
Curriculum.
camp on civic education, because if they understood how the government works, then they would be more empowered to infuse it in their curriculum. See, they don't understand or
Yeah.
see how important it is. So why would I include it? Why
Wow.
would I make that a priority?
But see, I know the governor of Florida has recently issued millions of dollars towards civics education in lieu of some of the other curriculum that was being pushed in the state. And so, with that, how can you take initiative to help teachers get on board with, I guess, spreading a civics education awareness, but doing it in a lens of, in a diverse lens, or in a way that it supports diverse BIPOC communities? Because, I mean, I'm going to be honest, civics is not being talked about in some of these underserved or diverse communities. That is not a topic of interest. Maybe math, maybe STEM. We've gotten that, and even English at times, but not civics. I'm going to be honest. Civics and history were my taboo subjects. I am still tormented by my teacher, who I think I was in second grade, and she had us talking about like history and slavery and all this. And I remember she said, "Raise your hand if your family owned slaves." And she made my classmates raise their hand, and they looked back at me. I was in the back of the classroom. They all looked back at me. Some of them were super embarrassed, red faces. We were all uncomfortable. My friends weren't signing up for this. She put us in that pickle, and that triggers, like, that makes me think,
Yes, that sets the tone for you to just turn
it off.
yes.
Everything about it. So even when we hear about politics, and I'm not going to get into that with the show, because I try to stay as neutral as possible.
Me too.
When you hear about it, it's like the party is like, who cares? Because I mean, I don't know if there's going to be representation for your specific needs as somebody in a diverse community. So then when you're talking about civics education, I feel like sometimes those parents and people in the communities, they're like, who cares? Because they don't feel like anything's going to really be done to help service their families and their communities. So back to the question of how do you, I guess, bring initiatives to support this latest millions of dollars of funding in civics education, and how do you bring awareness to those parents, in diverse communities, to get them on board?
We need to first not politicize this initiative.
Yeah.
So it's been politicized, in my opinion. We got to leave indoctrination outside of the conversation, and we need to just approach it from a very nonpartisan perspective.
Yeah.
When you look at our local and city governments, I always ask my kids, is your mayor a Republican or a Democrat? They don't know. Right. You don't need political party affiliation to be associated with someone that is in charge of making sure your garbage gets picked up. Like that is what we need to go back to. But that's hard to do when the Civic Literacy Excellence Initiative is being painted as an agenda, a politicized agenda to indoctrinate students towards a conservative way of thinking. So the initiative in itself is great. The idea is great, but how it's being presented, as well as how it's being received, is where the controversy lies. Yeah. So I believe there is a hunger from all parties, young and old, to learn more about civics, but everyone's afraid of getting canceled. Everyone's afraid of losing their jobs. Just imagine that teacher, and just imagine the political climate that we're in the year 2024. School's around the corner. Teachers are going to be very careful regarding certain things that they discuss. And I understand because I'm an educator as well, but it's unfortunate because it results in them not covering what needs to be covered.
Mm.
So everyone wants to share the knowledge. The question is how.
Yeah, and then like it makes me think of like even various holidays that we celebrate in diverse communities,
Mhm.
but in particular in this nation, we've got Black History Month and even Hispanic Heritage Month and things like that. How does civics play a role in those different holiday celebrations? Is there any way we can tag on civics education in those areas in a way that makes it
Well,
more
all of those holidays are approved by the federal government, and the state government determines the holidays that they recognize. So, for example, with Juneteenth, it's not recognized statewide. Depending on the city, town, or agency that you work for, you may or may not have to work. So, I work for Miami-Dade Public Schools. We were given a day off. But 2 years ago, I was working for the state of Florida, Florida Department of Education. I didn't have that day off. So that's another topic, federalism, this relationship between state governments, our national government, and local governments. Kids don't understand how that works. Perfect example of that was COVID. You go to one county, you must wear your mask. You go to a different county, it's not required. You go to the airport, you must. So everyone's confused because they don't know how the system works. So just bringing up something as simple as the celebration of Juneteenth, I believe that there is an opportunity to share civic education with students almost every day. And the reason why is because the government is everywhere. Like the reason why you and I are here is because of the government. We have access to the internet because of the government. Our students get up and they go to school every day. More than likely, they're going to a public school. Um, let's take, for example, President Joe Biden decided to drop out of the race. That's a great conversation to have with students. You can go as far as, well, let's talk about what happens if a president is unable to fulfill his or her duties. Identify the amendment in the Constitution that gives us that presidential line of succession. If he wanted to step down in his duties today, who's going to be next in line to become president? Kamala Harris. Who's next if she's not available? So, I mean,
yeah.
when you think about what's going on in our society today, there's always an opportunity to teach civics. The question is are we able to do that? Are we able to bridge that, make that connection?
Yeah.
And we can once we as the adult become more involved and invested in civic education. It'll automatically trickle down.
I think this is powerful. And I think, honestly, in many diverse communities, we're not talking about civics. Like, I mean, this is big now because, of course, like what you were talking about with like the election stuff. But
you know what? I'm sorry to cut you off. We are talking about it. We're not doing anything. So,
oh, wow.
We're aware that there is a government, there's a system, there are individuals in office that make decisions on our behalf, but we are not doing anything regarding that because in our minds, we're powerless. When the truth is, we have all the power. Notice what happened once President Joe Biden endorsed Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee. People started to mobilize immediately. Immediately, she raised over $80 million in 24 hours. That's the type of civic engagement that we want our Black and Brown students to participate in, but they don't know how. And oftentimes they don't think that they can actually rally and mobilize in that way, but they can.
But how can they do that on a local level? Like, what if it's not just about vote, but what can they do? Like you said, like what can you do in the schools? Like, how do you get involved in that? Do you have to run for office? What do you have to do?
Right? They can run for office. They can volunteer. Schools traditionally will have key clubs. You have local chapters of Black Student Union. My first encounter with Black Student Union was at the collegiate level.
Yeah, mine too.
Black Student Union in high school. You also have Latinos in action because what we've noticed is that if you create those clubs on campus and the buy-in is there, the students feel, okay, I'm not the only one in the room.
Yeah.
There are other individuals that look like me, like-minded individuals that have the same background as me, and we can mobilize and also have, a stake. We can become stakeholders in this society as well, in our government as well.
But what about parents? Parents might feel, okay,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sending my kids to school. Like, I mean, I've got a middle schooler, I have a high schooler.
I would
Um,
say PTA, but let's be honest, nobody goes. I don't go. But social media, the parents are on social media. So I think parents have to first admit, because what
yeah.
I've noticed as a classroom teacher,
Hmm.
we would go over all of these different elements of our government, and I would tell students, go home and test your parents, see if they know, and they don't know. But instead of just owning up to it and receiving the information from the students, they go back and forth. They go
Wow.
back and forth. So, I mean, local cities, municipalities, what they should offer are civic ed courses. If I was serving on the council, I would want my constituents to become more knowledgeable in terms of how the government works. But then we can turn this into a whole conversation. Do they
This
really
is
want to
amazing.
know? That's
But you're
another.
so, you're so gritty about this. What cultivated your passion towards civics? Like, I mean,
You
you
really
being
want me to tell
out
you?
yeah.
I was in the 11th grade. My U.S. history teacher, Annie Sherman, I still remember this woman. I wrote an essay and submitted it to the city of North Miami about why I should go to Washington, D.C. I didn't really care. I just wrote it because she made me. And I won a free trip to Washington, D.C. under the Close Up Foundation. And I was there for an entire week. As a matter of fact, we were assigned roommates.
Uh-huh.
So other students that attended the trip with me from my homeschool, we didn't even room with each other. They
Oh
kind of
wow.
like pushed us out of our comfort
Yeah.
zone and taught us about how the government works and took us on a I fell in love with DC. I told
Yeah.
myself that I was going to grow up, go to college, and live in DC and work for the government. That
You
didn't
know what?
happen, but
I know, but you're on your way. I mean, it's
that's where it started. That's where it started.
a part of me is like I'm very grateful that you've done what you've done as a as a curriculum specialist and teaching civics. You have so much more, I think, on you to offer, and someone like you would be just unstoppable in the White House and government. And so I don't know if there's fear holding you back, but I want to encourage you to cultivate grit, to get rid of any anxieties and put together a plan and make it happen. I do have somebody I want to introduce you to as well, that I think can help you get some footing in that direction. But yeah, I'm thinking. So if you were in government, what would you do? What would you do? What
Well,
would
I've
you
been in the back of my mind, and I'm working on it. I would like to run for a councilman seat in my city, most definitely.
Okay, and you're which city?
City of Miami Gardens.
Okay. So you'd be
Yeah,
representing like Miami-Dade.
I'll be representing like the northern part of Miami-Dade County, like
Okay.
around the Dolphin Stadium. Like that's the
Okay.
area that I will be representing.
Now, would that take funding? What would that take? Because I don't know how all this
I
works.
think it honestly, I really feel like it just takes me getting the word out about myself. That's it.
Yeah.
The beauty of local and city government is that it doesn't require so much funding because the positions are being run on a nonpartisan basis. No one is allowed to run on a Democratic Party ticket or a Republican Party ticket. So because of that, why do you need all this funding? Why do you need all to represent your city?
Yeah.
How much funding do you really need when you compare it to, let's say, candidates like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? They're riding on a political party ticket, and that political party has a platform. So corporations and individuals are going to pour money and dollars, not necessarily into the candidate, it's into the party. When you remove the party, then we can have a real discussion about how to invoke social change. The parties to me are the problem, but that we can have a whole nother podcast about
Oh
that.
wow.
I truly believe the political parties they hinder us. They're more divisive. They're more polarized. Everyone is like, it's either you with us or you're against us. When you
Mm,
think about legislators 20 or 30 years ago, you may or may not know their political party affiliation. Right now, everyone makes it very clear who they are in an alliance with or in alignment with because they have to. If they don't, we don't want them. We don't want them.
mm. Wow.
Yep.
So
All we see
then,
is red and blue. That's it. Nothing else.
so if you were to, get your grit up and to pursue this, and you would want to bring about change, what are some things you would like to see change in the space of education, for instance?
In the space of education, let me not speak too soon, but I think we got to find a way to get parents more involved. I don't have the answer to that,
Yeah.
but I'm a true believer in the most successful students are those that have the support system of their parents and the parents that are stakeholders in those communities. So I don't know how to like address that when you think about life, because life be life in.
Yeah.
When you really
Right.
sit down and talk to some of these parents, they don't even have the time to do
Yeah.
homework with
Kids
their
are
kids.
playing sports, things are
Yeah.
happening, they're in the band, they're in gymnastics.
Yeah.
I think this is, unfortunately, it's just, I don't know if they have even thought to make room for it. So how can we then maybe offer, maybe you could help spearhead something like this, civics education for families, maybe a civics night
I was thinking
on
that we need to
campuses.
meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
So the district in itself, school districts in itself can't possibly address all of the issues. So
Right.
that's where the local and city governments come in. They love to come in when it's election time, right? They love to come and take pictures with our kids and kiss the babies. But we need to they need to adopt some of these schools in their communities. And they need to make sure that they are supporting these schools so that way the schools can support the students and the parents.
They need to be results driven actions taken by them.
So when
Not
we create these school improvement plans, there needs to be a space for our local government, not our national government. Believe it or
wow.
not, the local municipalities have the greatest impact on our students. State government they're the ones creating the benchmarks, the standards. They're determining what elements of history is being taught, not the national government, but our focus is on which level? The national government.
National.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
So I think, what's your last advice that you have for maybe parents, teachers, and, leaders just to remain gritty when it comes down to having that civics awareness and not only informing our students, but, our communities as well.
Seek information and ask questions if you don't have an answer. Because I think a lot of the situations that I'm noticing in our communities is that people just don't ask.
Who do they ask? Who do they ask?
That's where the civic education piece comes in, because oftentimes they have the questions, but they don't know
who to reach out to
first. Yes.
Right. Do they reach out to the local, because sometimes I get messages from some of the
It
local.
starts at the bottom and then it goes to the top.
So how does the parent reach out though to someone, maybe someone running for office or someone that's sitting in their seat? How do they find out that information?
All of that information is usually available on the website. For example, one of our civics benchmarks for seventh graders is for them to be able to locate elected officials depending on problems that they may have in their communities. So we actually created like a web quest.
Yeah.
We gave students like scenarios. Here's a scenario. Yeah. Who do you go to first? Which department? There's water department. You have sanitation. You have if we can do that with a seventh grader, we can do that with an adult.
Do that district wide?
Yes. That's one of our lessons. That's one of our district approved lessons. That's one of our benchmarks. Our students are tested on that on the state civics EOC exam. So we have a system put in place. We just have to make sure that everyone is they're mastering those benchmarks.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, you go to the more affluent neighborhoods, they got it. Because their parents are also knowledgeable. They go home and actually have discussions.
Have these conversations.
Our other babies, on the other hand, they're dealing with other things. So
I know it.
The teacher may go over it, but it's not landing.
And it's not relevant
Yes.
like it should be.
It's not important right now. Yeah.
Right. Well, the thing is, there's not representation in these offices.
Mm-hmm.
They have other things, right? The representation comes from the TV where I'm seeing LeBron James and I'm seeing Rihanna. I don't have representation in these legal spaces. And they're talking over my head language that I don't understand with Florida statutes and all this other stuff, right? Like, for example. So there's no interest. The relevance piece is not there. And that's why I think you are so powerful in the seat that you're in, because you can provide relevance and make it make sense to these diverse communities that are feeling like it's over their head and they feel clueless and they feel powerless and they feel like their vote doesn't matter, their voice doesn't matter, they don't need to reach out because they don't see anybody else doing it and they don't even know how to get started. Yep. So this is why I think we need to definitely keep you on board. I want to now end this, Cindy, this has been fabulous. You're a breath of fresh air in this topic. I hope to have you back on the show, especially, as we see things unfold in our nation. And so can you tell us again, how can we reach you?
You can reach me on social media through Instagram. My social media handle is sin_cycle, CIN_cycle, because I'm also a fitness instructor. So that's why cycle.
So sin_cycle_cycle?
No, sin_cycle. That's it. Sin_cycle. You can also email me at my Gmail, CPMARCELIN N as in Nancy @gmail.com.
Okay, so we've got the email, cpmarcelin@gmail.com, guys. And then she's also a fitness instructor for all of us that are trying to get in shape.
CIN.
I definitely need to check you out on that as well. So excellent. So find her at sin_cycle on social media outlets.
It's CIN_cycle.
My bad, y'all. So CIN_cycle.
Yep.
I'm not trying to put out false information here. So again, here we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Sin_cycle. Okay. So reach her there. I know y'all need to, we're getting ready to go back to school. A lot of us, that's on our list, our to-do list of, staying in shape, keeping up with middle schoolers, these high schoolers, you APs, keeping up with those you have to run after, and things like that. So again, Cindy, thank you so much for being on thank you so much for being on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so happy to have you. And for those that are watching, thank you so much for watching us. And I just want to leave with some announcements. Again, you'll find this podcast. You will be able to find this show on Spotify. You'll also be able to find it on all of the social media platforms. So be on the lookout there. Speaking of social media platforms, I do want to invite you guys to follow my different social media platforms. Signing on late. You've got Facebook, India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter is India Speaking Team. Instagram is India238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. Check out the website www.india-white.com to schedule me and to even reach out about this podcast if you're having any questions or you're wanting Cindy to come in and to do some work, some consulting work or some things like that for you. Okay. Also, I'll be seeing you guys at these wonderful conferences listed here in August. I'll be in California with you guys and spread throughout the nation. I can't wait to work with you all to talk about grit. And again, catch me on the next show for sure, because I know we're going to continue to talk great things about grit and how to cultivate grit. And until next time, guys, stay gritty. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.